the season of Advent demands that we spend a little more time engaging in darkness. The days are shorter, the nights are longer, and the weather patterns invite us, as they might, to experience some of the brutal winds from the north, or the freezing rain, or the sleet and the snow. We found out last week just how calm those winds can be as 20 of us gathered for a service in the midst of a Nebraska blizzard. It's sort of tempting to go into hibernation mode, isn't it, this time of year? To kind of curl up under a blanket with some popcorn or something, watch some sports or a movie. We crave light and warmth. In fact, our bodies need light and warmth. I always find that many people who struggle with mental illness don't do emotionally well with increased darkness. Cynicism, despair, depression, they are our frequent companions during this time of year. I've been texting with a couple of people throughout the week who have not dealt well with the darkness this week. Visits to counselors and therapists seem to be more frequent as we long for the light. Now that's the physical and the emotional aspects of darkness. But there can be a spiritual darkness that accompanies physical darkness. We can find ourselves lost in darkness, so to say. The darkness is a metaphor, of course, or a symbol of what is going on inside of us. Everything that's not good that's going inside of us. You know, the troubled dreams, or the fears and the insecurities, or that we are not living up to what we should be. We have grief from the death of one that we've loved and lost. Darkness is the anguish that comes from a broken relationship. What do we do now that we are in this alone? Darkness is the despair that is a part of feeling trapped by an unfulfilling job. Darkness is the distress of watching a loved one being challenged or suffering and you can't do anything about it. Then there is the darkness of the world. The earthquakes that strike a city like Anchorage and highways torn up in a community that's almost experiencing 24 hours of darkness this time of year. There's the continuous cycle of damage to children, or the widespread use of violence to hurt and destroy. There's the victimization of women and our gay, lesbian, transgender communities. There's harm done to our natural resources that cause global warming. And then there's the failure when we turn to war and think that war will solve the problems of the world. The lessons for this Sunday tell us to get ready for the advent of a new world. A new world. Think about that. The season of Advent challenges us to think in the midst of all preparing for Christmas that we are doing in our homes and in our lives, of what it means that God loves this world, and God wants the world to be different, and that Jesus comes into the world, be it 2,000 years ago, to show us the sort of world that God envisions and loves. And so we turn to Luke, the Gospel writer. Luke, who we will be hearing from throughout this year in the lectionary cycle. Luke writes to a community that's waiting for the advent of a new world, just like some of the people in this world are. Because in Luke's world there is way too much darkness. There's way too much war and violence. There's way too much suffering. There's way too much broken relationship. And so in this waiting for a new world, Luke says to his church, learn from Jesus. Learn where to look for Jesus. Learn how to live as God wants to live. Church, live in community with others. And live in ways that are peaceful and compassionate and joyous and just. And in ways that provide resources for everyone who is a part of your community. The lesson for the first Sunday of Advent doesn't come from the Christmas stories. It doesn't come from the beginning of Luke, it comes from the end. It comes from the end where Jesus' words to his disciples are just 2 days before Good Friday. And Jesus uses strong words to speak to his friends. He uses what's called apocalyptic imagery. Imagery that talks about the end of time. People living in Jesus' day were very familiar with apocalyptic language and talk. And this kind of talk prophesied all sorts of terrifying events that would lead up to this cataclysmic end to the world. Were they expecting an end to the world? A physical end? No. Were they expecting that things would change in their lives? Yes. So, church, we might be thinking about where we're going to hang lights outside, or when it's going to be warm enough to hang lights outside if we miss Thanksgiving. We're wondering about trimming the trees, or thinking about a list of gifts that we need to buy and what our church is asking us to buy. And today we hear thoughts from Jesus, who is on his way to the cross, which was the most humiliating and painful way to die. Jesus, of course, is not thinking about decorating Christmas trees. He's not thinking about shopping or presents or babies who turn out to be God. No, Jesus says this in verse 26 of chapter 21. People will faint from fear of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of heaven will be shaken. And people, preachers, God love them. Such a weird story. Have taken passages like this and produced fear in people's lives for the last 2,000 years, and even before that. Why does the lectionary go to the end of the gospel on this first Sunday of such a beautiful season like Advent? I mean, after all, most of the people are out there shopping. Probably a lot more people at the malls right now than there are sitting in church pews, even given the snow. Because we are drawn to this season. It's the biggest profit season in the whole time of year. November and December will count from 20 to 40% of the total sales of retail in a given year. So retail depends on us going to things like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and even if we don't go to the malls, to sit in front of the computer at home to make sure we get those deals. So thank you very much, Jesus. You are indeed the reason for the season here in the United States. We love it. The celebration of your birth turns our economy around. Almost $1 trillion spent in November and December, according to the National Retail Federation. After all, that is the reason you were born, right? First century Jerusalem wasn't all that different than 21st century Lincoln, Nebraska, or Washington, D.C., or New York City. Jesus knew what it was to observe the temple elites caught up in deals with Caesar and Pilate, as surely as we Christians know what it feels like to pay exorbitant prescription drug costs because politicians are bought and sold by corporate lobbyists. We love you, Walmart. Oh, and others. I'm sorry. I've been there like 3 times this week. We know what it is to hear about nations going to war with each other and to worry that peace is drowning in the sea of violence and bitterness. And yes, we have our own apocalyptic moments as well. Our darkness that creeps upon us that we just can't get enough light. You know, those relationships that are torn apart because of cheating or abuse. You know, the forced retirements, especially this time of year when jobs are lost, even though we know we've been a good employee all these years and worked hard. You know, our loved ones who die unexpectedly, the diagnosis of cancer that robs us of a life that we've built together with the one that we love. Our apocalyptic moments are real. We do experience the end of the world, as it seems. You know, the end of the world when our time, when we feel like our world is shattered. And we are so vulnerable to hopelessness and stress and depression. And sometimes we want the world to end. The season of Advent is our season of living in between worlds. Jesus says that this time, that our time that seems so desperate and chaotic and absent of love is a time for growth. Because Jesus says darkness isn't all that bad. We wouldn't be here if we lived in the light all the time. We have to live in darkness. While we wait in the dark this Advent season, we know that light is around the corner. And even death does not stop the light from entering our world. It doesn't. So, Luke is showing us that there is a new age waiting to dawn. That there is a new world waiting to break forth. That there is hope for all of us in all of our situations. And light meaning and purpose and reason to live in a world that seems dark. Let us journey with each other in the season of Advent. Let us journey toward the light. We offer an invitation for you to become a part of a community that seeks to bring light to people who feel their life is dark.